All right, so in this video, I'm going to show some techniques for modeling stuff that goes from flat to 3D in Onshape. To do this, I'm going to start with two simple parts. I'm going to start with a base and a piece that fits into that base. So this is going to be a tab and slot construction where one of the parts has a tab and the other part has a slot that matches up to it. So the first thing that I'm going to do for this is make a sketch on my top plane. And what I'd like to do is just start off with just a basic rectangle. And let's say that that rectangle is going to be 2 inches by, we'll say 1 inch. And now the next piece that I need to do is extrude this. But where this becomes really essential for our flat to 3D project is knowing exactly what the thickness of my cardboard is. So in this step, what you would want to do is grab some calipers, grab the actual cardboard that we're going to laser cut, and measure the thickness of that cardboard with calipers. Now, I've already gone through and done that process, and I can show you that later if you need to. But for right now, what I'm going to do, instead of just extruding to a specific height, is I'm actually going to go ahead and define what Onshape calls a variable. So if you've never used variables before, this is a really, really powerful tool, and it's something we're going to use a bunch during the flat to 3D project. So instead of extruding to this 1 inch depth, I'm going to type a hashtag or a pound sign, however you want to think about that, and I'm going to define a new variable called cardboard thickness. And when I hit enter, because this is the first time I'm using this variable, I'm creating it for the first time, this is where I can put in the actual value. I measured out the cardboard that I have is 0.16 inches. But it's really important that we use that variable because if we go back and measure the cardboard and the piece that you grabbed is actually 0.158 inches or 0.162 inches, in order to get a really good press fit tolerance so those pieces fit really well together, you want to be able to quickly and easily update that. So I'm going to create my variable and I'm going to click check on the extrude, and now it's going to extrude it to exactly that height that I defined. So that's the thickness of my piece of cardboard. So there's my base piece. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and model in my, my top figure that's going to sit on top of that. I'm going to make something pretty simple. I think for this, what I'm going to do to get my, my piece lined up is I'm going to make a, how do I want to do this? I think I'm going to make a new sketch on my front plane. And I'm going to go ahead and... Actually, I don't want to make a new sketch on my front plane. I'm going to do an offset plane. So I'm going to offset this front plane by 1/2 inch going back this way so that this sits right in the middle of that base piece. And now I'm going to sketch on that offset plane that I just made. And I can go to my front view. And now I'm going to go ahead and start sketching my figure. I'm going to make this figure very, very simple. I'm just going to make a rectangle, and maybe I'll make some splines to have like arms. And I'll double click there, and I'm going to have another really funky arm. This is starting to look a little bit like Baymax from Big Hero 6. I think that seems great. I'm going to go ahead and give it a head. I'm going to also even just trim off this part. And I'm going to trim off this line so that it's all sort of one thing. And that all seems great. And I'm going to make a couple rectangular, actually I'm just going to make one rectangular bottom part down here. And that seems fine. All right, so that looks good. Now, one of the things that I'm going to do here is I'm going to extrude this part here as well. Oh, actually, let me fix this in my sketch. Let me trim off this little bit right here. So that's all just one figure. That looks great. So one thing I'm going to do when I go to extrude this is I'm going to use my cardboard thickness variable here as well. And I'm going to actually make that extrude symmetrically. Since I put that sketch right in the center of my base piece, I'll have it extrude symmetrically. So it takes 1/2 of the thickness one direction, 1/2 of the thickness the other direction. So that piece remains basically centered on my base that way. Now, how are these two pieces actually joined together? Right now, they're really not. There's my top figure and my base, but one is just sort of sitting on top of the other. There's no way for those to connect. There's no joinery. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back to that initial sketch that I did, and I'm actually going to sketch out a tab at the bottom of this part. And the way that I'm going to do that is by making just a rectangle. I'm going to make this just kind of an arbitrary size, and I'm going to bring it down an arbitrary amount. But what's really important here now is I want that tab to be exactly the thickness of a piece of cardboard. So I'm going to come over to my dimension tool, and this dimension down here, I'm going to define as whatever the cardboard thickness is. That's whatever height I want that tab to be. And I can click OK. And now I need to go back to my extrude and pick up that part there as well so that it extrudes out my tab. Now that tab is just sort of sitting, that's sort of just like pushing through the base without there being an actual hole in the base. So what I want to do now is I want to make that actual hole in my base. And I can do that using kind of a cool technique that we'll use in Onshape at different times, which is to project something. So what I'm going to do is make a new sketch. I think I'm going to sketch on the bottom face of this, and then I'm going to actually turn off the visibility of this part and go straight to my bottom view. So even though I'm sketching on part 1, I've turned its visibility off. And what I want to do now is I want to project in exactly where that tab was to create the slot. So I'm going to come over here to my use command, my project or convert command, and I want to project in just these lines here. I want to use just these 4 lines right here. I'm going to click my check. And now if I turn my part back on, I still don't have a space for it, but as soon as I extrude and remove that away, you should see the tab sticking through there. So I'm going to go to extrude, I'm going to choose remove, and I'm going to choose to remove this material right here, and I'm going to click the check. Now, do you see that tab sticking through? Yeah, you do. That's awesome. These parts are not actually assembled, but I have made them so that they'll fit together. Yeah, what's the question? Okay, yeah, so the question was, don't I need to leave some tolerance between those two parts? And that's a really good question. If I was making these two parts out of steel, I would absolutely need to leave a little bit of extra tolerance, or hard plastic, for example, things that don't have any kind of flex or give. Right? So knowing what material you're designing for is a really important thing here. Because I'm designing this and I know I'm going to be making it out of cardboard, I know that my cardboard will flex a little bit. So I think I could actually make the slot and the tab the exact same size and rely on those two things flexing just a little bit as I push the cardboard through there to hold it in a really nice tight press fit. So that's a great question. I'm not going to leave any extra tolerance for here. But the nice thing is if I do a laser cut of these pieces and I find that I do need to add a little tolerance, I can pretty easily go back and add that into my to my sketch so that it changes that extrude. Yeah. I'm going to suggest that for right now you start without adding any additional tolerance, and we'll do some test cuts to make sure. So part of that's going to depend on how carefully you measure and how that turns out with the actual material itself. Okay, so I haven't done anything as far as assembling these things yet, but if I were to go and assemble these things, I could put in this whole part studio, I could click the check, and I can see that I can move these around. Maybe I want to fix this base part, and now what I can do is actually just add I can just add a fastened mate between these two things. I can say, yep, I want a fastened mate that goes between, we'll grab, let's see, how do we want to do this? Let's do a fasten mate from this top surface, if it'll show it to me. I may not want to show it to me. Oh, there it goes. There's that. And then I can zoom back, and I can find the mate connector that's at the center of this. And I'm going to want to flip that around. No, that's not it. Oh, I think I must have grabbed the wrong mate connector there. Well, anyway, I'm not going to add to this video by showing this, but basically I can join those two parts together by using the mate connectors to actually assemble those. So I'm going to stop this video here, and I'm going to show one more technique in the next one.